रागेच्छा सुख दुःखादि बुद्धौ सत्यां प्रवर्तते सुषुप्तौ नास्ति तन्नाशे तस्माद् बुद्धेस्तु नात्मनः रागेच्छा सुख दुःखादि बुद्धौ सत्यां प्रवर्तते सुषुप्तौ नास्ति तन्नाशे तस्माद् बुद्धेस्तु नात्मनः Raga, attachment, Ichha, desire, Sukha, pleasure, Dukkha, pain, Adi, etc. Ragecha, Sukha, Dukkhadi are perceived when the intellect is present. Buddhau Satyam Pravartate. They arise when the intellect is present, not in deep sleep. Nasti Tannashe. Tasmad Buddhestu Natmana. Sushuptau. In deep sleep, nasti. In deep sleep, there is no intellect. Therefore, they are of the intellect and not of the Atman. Tasmat, therefore, buddhestuna atmanaha. The qualities of attachment, desire, pleasure, pain, etc. belong to the intellect, not to the Atman. Look at the argument. This is how you come to a rational conclusion that Atman has no qualities and attributes. If Atman has any qualities and attributes, it must be there in the presence of the Atman, wherein in deep sleep. It is, sorry, in the state of Turiya also. But it's not there in Turiya. Why? If it is there everywhere, it must be there in waking, dream, deep sleep, and Turiya. It's not there in Turiya. Why? The intellect is not there in Turiya. Therefore, it is not the quality of the Atman. It is the quality of the intellect. The intellect is available in waking and dream. Intellect is not available in deep sleep. It's not available in Turiya also. So I'm just extending. Intellect is not available in deep sleep. Intellect is not available in Turiya, the fourth state. Therefore, it is not of the Atman, it is of the intellect. But Atman is there in deep sleep. Atman is there in Turiya. Atman is also there in waking dream. So what is interesting, I don't know how many of you feel a jerk. How many of you feel a jerk when you read the translation? Can we have the, okay, you all have read the translation? You all have taken note? Just for what it's worth, just read to the translation. I read for you all. Attachment, desire, pleasure, pain, etc. are perceived when the intellect is present, not in deep sleep when it ceases to exist. Therefore, they are, refers to attachment, desire, pleasure, pain, etc. are of the intellect, not Atman. So you should get a certain jerk when you read this translation, the verse itself. Now, I want to know, any one of you feel a jerk? I am getting a jerk. I don't know whether you get it. No, we'll carry on. Never mind. I go with the flow. Whatever the flow says, there I go. Who is feeling the jerk? Raise hands. Those people only I'll ask. Rest all are exempted. என்ன கலெக்டிவா நீங்க ஒரு யூனியன் கிரியேட் பண்ணீங்களா? நிறைய wisdom savers, wisdom, that group, this group is there. I think a strong union is formed now. I am left out of all of this. That looks like that. Gayatri ma, your only hope ma. I don't trust all these people.
Yes, Guruji.
Do you feel anything out of place?
Yes, that intellect is present, is not present in all those times. It is something, yeah, it's difficult to understand and perceive also like.
Which is difficult to understand, sorry, could you come again, please?
That intellect is not present in all the stages it is shown. like in the attachment, anger and all like.
What are you talking? Are did you get the concept right? In fact, can you read it in the chat box? Ravindraji has so kindly typed it out for us. Can you read
Pain
the
and
thing
pleasure
there?
are attributed to mind. No, much before that.
The earlier one.
Yeah. Attachment, desire, pleasure, pain, etc. are perceived when intellect is present. That is
Okay. Intellect is present.
present.
And therefore,
Not in deep sleep when ceases to exist.
what ceases to exist?
Intellect.
Correct. Therefore,
They are of the intellect and but not Atman. Okay, all these things are not attributed to Atman at all.
are they clear?
Yes.
Atman is very clear. The problem is not with Atman. The problem is everything else. We are so spiritually wise. Atman we have understood. Everything else we have not understood. Now where do you get the jerk, ma? There shouldn't be any jerk. I'm just saying. If you have the understanding right, it should be clear.
Yeah, I mean, deep sleep, there are no thoughts, nothing like, so all thoughts are there, but we are really, conscious about it. So that could be the reason.
You are getting a hiccup, not a jerk. I will come back to the hiccup later on. I'm saying a jerk, not a hiccup, ma. No. See, deep sleep, obviously, everything has gone to sleep.
Yes.
That is deep sleep, where the thoughts are not felt.
Yes.
Therefore, you have a sense of a sound sleep, a dreamless sleep.
Yes.
So I don't see any concern. So you don't have any attachments. There is no pleasure, pain, nor is there any desire in the deep sleep. Therefore, it is not of deep sleep.
Yes.
So intellect is not present in deep sleep. That is clear.
Okay.
Then I don't think I don't know what else is left in the verse. Through the process of deduction, you can come to the point. Okay, no, I get you, Maj. We'll leave it at that. Yes, Etuji.
Hari Om Guruji, when the conclusion is when all these things are there, when intellect is present, but it says, in other words, when mind is stronger than intellect, that is why all these are there. We do have intellect, but very weak intellect.
Sir, is that what the verse is conveying?
Attachment, desire, pleasure, pain, etc. are perceived when intellect is present.
No, where does the verse use manas in the verse?
It's not there, but I'm deducting.
You are detecting.
Intellect is there. Intellect is there in everyone.
Sir, I think you're slightly getting away from the concept. Having made the statement that these emotions like attachment, desire, pleasure, pain, etc., are perceived when the intellect is present, and he says these are the qualities of they're attributes of the intellect.
Yeah.
But what have we continuously learned? Badriji, you want to say something?
The attributes of the mind.
Pranam Guruji.
Yes, sir.
The verse, first of all, we have already learned that the Atman is ever present. It's not a transient thing. Now, intellect is transient because during deep sleep, we don't have intellectual experiences. So these attributes, which are intellectual experiences, they therefore have to be, since the attributes themselves are transient, they have to be attributable to a transient state and not to an ever-present state, which is the state of the Atman. So it essentially proves that these kinds of emotions, thoughts, feelings, etc., cannot be from the ever-present state because these feelings themselves are transient. So therefore, they have to be associated with a transient state like being awake when the intellect is active, and not when a different state when you're in deep sleep, when the intellect is not active. So it's a fairly clear attribution of transient experiences to a transient state.
No, sir, your message is straightforward and very much relatable. But if you can recall, my question is, where do you feel the jerk, not where you get clarity? You have explained where you get clarity.
Right.
I'm asking where you get jerk. One chance finish, sir. No second chance, sir. No second chance. Sir. Multiple choice, sir. You get what I'm saying.
The jerk is, in fact, in the clarity of exposition of this profound concept. That is the thing. I mean, what I've said is, nothing in terms of clarity compared to what the verse itself says is what I feel. I feel the verse is supremely, clear. That's what I'm trying to say.
No. Your understanding is very, very in line with what the messengers, what the message verses convey. But there could be a misunderstanding, which is what I, as a layman, if I look at it, it could cause a certain confusion. That's what my thought, and I wanted it to come from you all. Okay.
Yeah, Guruji,
Right,
they
I
are
will
of the
leave it at
intellect. See, therefore, they are of the intellect, it says, but when we have all through reading that attachment, desire, pleasure are of the mind.
That is the jerk we all should feel. We all have been understanding that attachment, desire, pleasure, pain are emotions of the mind. But then he says they are of the intellect, he says. So why? Because if you remember the previous verse, we said 22nd verse is about doership. Doership is attribute of the mind. Enjoyership is attribute of intellect. I mentioned this last week. So you must clearly differentiate the mind and intellect here. So it's not that there is a confusion. So this clarity, we will bring it up, but at least you must note that there is a ting, something must come. Hey, what is he saying? You must stand up and take note. That is what I wanted to bring it to the attention of everyone. Correct, Gayatrima. Yes, Vijayji? Anything to, yes, please.
It's pretty much everything. Just about the somewhat similar line I was thinking, but what on a feeling personal level, and to think that every night we possibly are our true selves, to wake up next morning and again start doing whatever we are doing as we know who we are, as we think who we are, is kind of scary. I'm not familiar with what I am in the night, deep sleep, but I seem to be doing it every night, and to think that I am that true self is, it raises a lot of questions as to, what do we do with this?
What do we do with what? Sorry.
With this knowledge. I mean, intellectually it's fine. In terms of really understanding it, there seems to be, it's kind of a feeling like, when you look at stars in the night, if you start thinking how far they are, it's scary. We all know intellectually they are very far, but you still try to conceptualize it's very far away, and how far away. It is, it's awesome stuff. So that's the kind of feeling I got. So I just wanted to share it.
I'm still not able to get to what you are saying.
What I'm saying is that it is something intellectually easily explained, but to feel it, that we are encountering, we still have not grappled it. It is mysterious and scary. All I'm saying is that.
There shouldn't be anything to be fearful of, rather than
scary means is, puzzled. I mean, maybe the wrong word I'm using.
Right. Okay. See, if you I relate to what you're saying. See, a little earlier, did I not classify saying when you worship the senses, you're a sensualist, a materialist, emotional? When you are just dabbling with the thoughts, you become an intellectual. But there's a shift of gear from intellectual to spiritual. It is not mere dabbling of ideas without able to feel the ideas. See, when does one gain a perception is when emotion gets injected into a thought or an idea. When there's a marriage of head and heart, then comes a perception. You feel what you say. Like if I say something, if I'm intellectualizing something, it must be backed with a sense of appreciation or a feeling or a depth. As they say, it's not, what is that phrase? I don't know, somewhere in poetry we learn, I think it's Shakespeare, I don't know where it is. It is not it's the tumult of the soul, he says, isn't it? Where's that phrase comes from? Anybody, anything rings a bell to anyone? He says something to that effect, the second half of the line I'm able to get, So when dry intellection is of no use, but when you start feeling and you start loving it, you start relating to it, as I think it Wordsworth who says, all at once I saw a host of golden daffodils, he saw fluttering and dancing in the breeze, he starts appreciating it from a distance, and then he becomes one with them. He identifies with them and he realizes that unity, that realization of oneness. When you feel, that's the shift between intellectualization and spiritualization, Okay, no, I get what you said there. Now, coming to the point which we wanted to draw out, where we said about attachment, desire, pleasure, pain. Now, all of these arise. When do they arise? They arise. When do desire, attachment, pleasure, pain arise? Ushama, when do you think desire, attachment, pleasure, and pain arise?
Namaste, Guruji. When you're awake, or when you're when you're attached to the world.
The question is, when does desire, attachment, pleasure, pain arise? You are saying when attached to the world. Adipudi? Now that's my question. When do they arise? Now I'm not beating around the bush. I'm coming straight to the point. And if you answer this, you know where exactly it comes from.
When the intellect is active, when you're emotional.
No, ma. No. That's not when a desire. See, attachment, pleasure, and pain are products of desire. Yeah. So my question is, when does desire arise? Desire.
When senses and your vasanas and your mind. I
don't think there's anything left in Vedantic philosophy. Everything you've covered. So multiple choice, I have to choose from that. Huh? No. See, let's just to be fair to you. I know there is a little clarity required there. What we are saying is that desire is born when there is a feeling of a void.
Okay.
When you feel a void or an emptiness or an incompleteness within, there is a
desire.
Origin of a desire. The origin of a desire is thought. Thought comes only when there is a void. This is the thought we got to have. You get what I'm saying? Desire arises only when one feels a void or an emptiness. And that emptiness creates a thought. And where does a thought manifest? The thought manifests in the intellect. And the desire manifests in the mind. Action manifests in the body. This is the line of thought. Are you all following what I said? Or in repetition? Gayatri Ma.
the thought arises in the intellect, then desire at the mind, and action at the physical level.
Correct. Intellect, thought, desire, mind,
Mind,
and
and
the
action at the body, physical body level.
yes. So, but desire is, you know, how is a desire defined? Desire is defined as a plan or a scheme by the intellect. Please write it down. Harish, if you can just capture this line. Desire is defined as a plan or a scheme entertained by the intellect. Because it is the intellect that identifies the void and entertains that specific thought that could fill the void. I repeat, it is the intellect that perceives the void and entertains that particular thought to fill the void. Therefore, desire is defined as a plan or a scheme entertained by the intellect. And mind's job is to entertain those thoughts. But it all starts with the intellect. And where does the intellect come from? Where does a thought come from? When there's a void. So the line of thought is the void, desire, action. Void, thought, desire, action. Thought in the intellect, desire in the mind, action of the body. And attachment here is described as an initial thought flow. All right. So from attachment comes desire, from desire comes pleasure and pain. Pleasure and pain are modifications of whether you get your object fulfilled or you don't fulfill them. As simple as that. Now, these are the emotions like joy and sorrow, etc. are emotions which are felt by the mind, isn't it? Even now we said desire also belongs to the mind. But then here the confusion is, he says it belongs to the intellect. Now, what you must understand is, even though they are experienced by the mind, they are interpreted by the intellect. That's why he says it is an attribute of the intellect, not the mind, because mind by itself has no capacity to discriminate. It is intellect that discriminates between the various multitudes of emotions. So it is experienced by the mind, but it is interpreted by the intellect. So the various conditions of the mind, it is the intellect that's able to differentiate between joy and sorrow, honor and dishonor, all that fluctuations, envy, jealousy, hatred, compassion, kindness. The mind doesn't know what it is. It's the intellect that interprets it and communicates to us. And that's where we get the knowledge from. That's where we get the perception from. That's where we experience it. Therefore, he says the enjoyership attitude is an attribute of the intellect and not of the mind. The ahankar is an attribute of the mind. Enjoyership is attribute of the intellect. It's a subtle point, but you should be able to understand it clearly. Once you get it, then there's no confusion. Does it make sense? You all follow what I've said? Sidraman Garu, all okay wa?
All okay.
Huh?
All okay.
Okay.
Okay, can you just briefly say what I've said? What have you understood? Just to make sure you have not misunderstood. I'm not testing your understanding, please.
Yeah. Attachment or ahankara or doership is of mind, and enjoyership is of intellect.
Okay.
And thought manifests in the intellect, desire manifests in the mind, and action manifests in the physical body.
Yes.
Desire is a plan or scheme entertained by the intellect.
Okay.
And void leads to thought leads to desire leads to action.
Yes.
And attachment leads to desire leads to pleasure or pain.
Yes.
And joy or pain are emotions felt by mind.
Okay.
And thought, they are experienced by mind and they are interpreted by the intellect.
So the experience, it's felt by the mind, but understood and interpreted by the intellect. Therefore, he says it is an attribute of the intellect, not the mind. And why mind can't feel? Because the mind doesn't have the capacity to discriminate. Isn't it? That is not the attribute of the mind. The job of the intellect is to constantly discriminate between good and bad, right and wrong, plus and minus. So it is able to experience the variety of emotions which are perceived by the mind. But it's the intellect that interprets it and communicates the experience to you. And that's where you realize it. It's like you did not know that you had with you. It is when you become conscious of it, you know, oh, I've always had the key in my pocket, or I always had the watch on my wrist, and I've been searching everywhere. You have it, but you don't know. You're not conscious of it. So it's the intellect that makes you conscious of it in that sense. You're right, sir. You get it? Huh? Badriji, are we right?
Yeah, the difference, the mind and intellect are almost joined at the hip, you can say, but there is a difference, and the difference is subtle, and that is what you have explained to us. It's almost like saying that the experience of all these desires and thoughts is an attribute, is a product of the mind, but the experiencer, which means the one that feels the idea of pleasure or the idea of pain. Okay, all these are all perceptions which require discrimination, and therefore they are all activities of the intellect. So in a sense, the way I'm understanding is there is an experience and there is an experience. The mind is merely as a receptacle of all experiences, but the experiencer, which feels all the emotions, the pleasure, pain, etc., whatever the verse is saying, is actually the intellect.
The intellect, yes. Correct. So the mind feels it. It's the intellect that makes sense of it.
Right.
And registers it. All right.
But am I correct that they're almost joined together, and it requires a lot of understanding to understand they're separate to this thing?
Yes. In fact,
unlike the body, which is clearly separate, the mind and intellect are not so clearly separate. They needs to be understood.
Yeah, it's subtle. The difference between them is subtle.
Right.
In fact, it is very easy to, or very straightforward rather, to say the mind is the non-rational element, the intellect is the rational element. Because they are not two different entities. There's only one, which is thoughts. They're both nothing but thoughts, isn't it?
Right.
But when they become indiscriminate and impulsive, it is the mind. When it is discriminate and rational, it's the intellect.
Right. One can take a crude parallel with the computer. Okay. The memory of the computer is like the mind. Okay. It just has certain capacity to store things, but it has no capacity to process things. Whereas there's something called a processor inside the computer, which actually acts on the memory, receives from the memory and decides what to do. So it's the entire intelligence of a computer resides in the processor. The memory by itself is passive. It means nothing. So like all analogies, everything, this has limitations, but it's a good way of understanding the limited role of the mind and higher role for the intellect.
Sir, I have learned something extraordinary about a computer. That there's something called a processor. It's a processor that processes.
Right.
It's something extraordinary. I've been using computer for long, but idella avidya, ignorance idella. Okay. Right comparison. Very well said, sir. Beautifully summarized. Okay. Now, if that is clear, I think Shilama actually had posed a question a little earlier. She's asking, Guruji, when we say put your heart and soul in all your work, what exactly does it mean? Where did we say that, or in which context? Sorry, we may have to backtrack a little bit. Shilama, are you in a position to
Yeah.
clarify?
Actually, like for any work, whatever we are doing, we always say put your heart and soul into your work.
Mhm.
It is not today, but maybe earlier also it was told that when we do something, we say that, okay, do it with complete dedication. And we say that we should put our heart and soul in the work and then do it that way. So that's what I was wondering, okay, how to correlate that with this intellect, the difference between what we are discussing today.
See, when that statement, put your heart and soul into it, uh, in a way, in a very layman sense, conveys that. But this is likely different to that statement. But in the context of what we said is when your heart feels what your intellect understands, that is when it gives a new dimension. You experience a certain bliss or joy with the work that you do.
Yeah. Yes.
So even the knowledge which we learn, it becomes an experience only when your emotion
Yes.
it backs it, it supports your understanding. When you start
Yes.
feeling the words, that's what we said.
Yes.
Okay, ma?
Thank you.
Right, ma. Yeah, Vijayji.
Now you have answered that thing, Guruji. Thank you.
Right, sir. Right. All right. I don't want to get into the couple of comments Padmini and Sai has mentioned, because it's all highly computerized knowledge. Huh? They're talking of computer crashing, and also I'm going to crash soon if I go in that line. Okay. So let's then, with the mind and intellect, the mind is doer, intellect is the enjoyer. Then what is the nature of the mind? So nature of the Atman rather is captured in the 24th verse. Okay, so let's move on.